Hello everyone, hope all is well, and thanks for tuning into Moose Motion, and welcome to part 6 of the Skyline project. During this video, we'll be working on that shell a little bit, getting that engine bay all nice and painted, as well as adding some of the parts to that engine.
Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well, and thank you for tuning into Moose Motion. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new, and be sure you have your post notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the new content. Anyway, thank you for your support, it's highly appreciated.
So we'll first start off by cleaning up this engine bay, getting it all prepped for paint, just making it look a little bit more presentable, straightening up the lines and low spots. Because, well, once that engine is in, we won't have the opportunity to really do anything quite like this again, so may as well make it nice and perfect, because, well, I'm a bit picky, and, yeah, I don't want to do things twice and have to paint it several times over, so we're just going to start by, well, hacking things here. Unfortunately, this part I hack a little too much. At any rate, we'll fix that. It'll be easier to work on while it's out of the engine bay as is. We'll make sure that little RB26 fits inside there a little tighter than normal because it's sitting a little high, and I can see that being an issue for when we finally decide to start manufacturing a little hood for this car. Even though 9 times out of 10 my cars don't usually have the hoods on it because, well, I don't want to hide all that detail, obviously. However, for aesthetic purposes, I generally like to make one anyway, just in case there's that one rare situation where I want to have the hood on, or just have it kind of propped up in the background to make it look a little bit cooler and fancier. Because unfortunately, making the hood is probably one of the hardest parts about making these little cars out of clay, because you're dealing with very, very thin layers, and there's not a whole lot of clearance room, unfortunately, so it's not exactly an easy task, so the more prep work I do now means the less, well, strenuous the hood's going to be. At any rate, now we're going to do a bit of test fitting, making sure there's enough clearance for all the pipes and all things like that, and then we're going to basically take the engine back out, carve those sections, test fit it back in. It's kind of, unfortunately, a bit of a tedious process. However, it is necessary to make sure everything's going to fit properly. Because, unfortunately, dealing with stuff that's this small, there's not exactly a really good way to get a good precise measurement on this stuff, so a lot of the time you're just kind of having to eyeball it to make sure things fit properly, and the best way to do that is just kind of pulling in and out of the engine bay. What we're also going to do, because I'm kind of a fan of really dirty, loud exhausts, we're going to add a side pipe to this car, just straight out the side, right behind the front wheel, because why not? It's going to be extremely loud, and we're going to have it spit some fire because, well, that would just look cool. It'll be extra work in the stop motion process, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice. As well as the name of clay horsepower, because, well, that's now going to be a thing, because why not? Clay horsepower is what makes the clay wheels move, right? Yes, it is. Anyway, speaking of making clay horsepower, we're now going to essentially clean up this pipe and give it a quick oven bake, just to make sure things are nice and even, because it's going to be really tight once it's in there. There's not going to be a whole lot of, well, room to work on things anymore, so we want to make sure all these tiny little components are basically nice and perfect, so there's just no issues later on when it's finally installed in the engine bay, because you won't be able to really get at it very easily without having to yank things out, and I don't want to have to do that a whole bunch of times. Then we're going to move on to installing all those little parts, and once those are in place, we'll start painting that engine bay as well as the undercarriage. Now, I generally just like to go black most of the time with all of this stuff, because that's what I kind of like to do to my cars in real life, is generally just rock guard the entire, well, shell, undercarriage, engine bay, everything to keep it nice and rust proof. Not only that, it does look nice and clean in the end, and will make that engine pop a lot more. That way it kind of shines out a little bit more in comparison to some of the rough edges that are in there. It kind of hides the imperfections as well, because black is a good color for that. The reason I also like to do that for the undercarriage, for the stop motion cars in particular, is because, well, that hides basically all the shadowing and various other little things that I like to hide under the cars during the animation process, because, well, they tend to defy gravity just a little bit and twist around, so I put little black bricks under there, and, well, if everything's blacked out, you're just less likely to actually notice that on camera, so there's a few reasons that I like to do it this way. And it kind of gives you that advantage to have that slight slide of camera, as it were. Then once all the paint work is done, we'll move on to getting some of those pipes installed, as well as making a few other small parts. Now, unfortunately, there's some bad news towards the end of this video. I will have to remake some things because it's just a little too large, and well, instead of adjusting the plumbing to make it work for those parts, it's probably just best to make the parts work for the plumbing due to the, well, limited space issue. So that will be covered in the build rundown towards the end of the video. And if by chance you do appreciate the content and like all the hard work that I put into these armature car dolls, as it were, be sure to smash that like button, leave a comment below what you think of the project, perhaps a suggestion what we could do to it, and be sure to keep your eyes peeled for Milton the Moose. And if you're unfamiliar with who that is, he is essentially the little mascot for the channel. He is the profile picture, as it were, so be sure to keep your eyes peeled for him, and if you timestamp correctly when he shows up, you will get a shout out like Mr. Tiger HD, who happens to have a very, very sharp set of eyes and is usually the, well, guy to look out for when it comes to spotting Milton. So congratulations, Tiger, and keep up the good work, my friend. I guess you could say he has the eye of a tiger. Ha ha, pun intended. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a little cringeworthy. Any rate, apart from my terrible jokes, perhaps consider subscribing if you're new, if you appreciate the talent that goes into making these tiny little clay cars. It's not easy making these tiny little parts, but in the end, I think it looks really cool and kind of is awesome seeing the little thing idle around in the stop motion process and punish the clay tires, as it were. Anyway, that's enough for me at the moment. I will see you towards the end of the video with the build rundown. And here we are at the end of the video, where we're going to do a quick rundown of what basically took place, as well as what's going to be happening next time. As you can see, that little RB26 is pretty much complete at this point. It's got all of its little plumbing fixtures on the turbos, and is ready to basically be shoved into that nice blacked out engine bay, which in the future we'll probably add some clear coat and stuff like that to it. Probably one more layer of paint wouldn't hurt, just to make sure things don't get scratched. Now, unfortunately, the bad news is that rad, as well as those air cleaners, as well as the intercooler that I made, are all just a little bit too big. Obviously, I've remade the air cleaners there out of plasticine and a little bit of oven baked clay just for the center bolt part. But the rad as well as the intercooler are kind of, well, just too big, and we'll have to unfortunately remake those parts because it's just going to be a little bit easier to essentially make smaller ones as opposed to making, well, those plumbing parts fit, unfortunately. So that's the bad news. Unfortunately, we're going to have to remake some stuff. Anyway, if you made it this far in the video, be sure to leave a like if you appreciate all the hard work, comment below what you think of the project, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new. Anyway, that's enough from me. Until next time, take it easy.